Hello, my name is Rob, and welcome back to Directors Uncut. We are in a podcast that puts filmmakers from all corners of the globe into a huge list that covers everything from silent city symphonies to rock and roll comedies. Then we pick a name from a huge bank of directors to chat about their work through 2 films. To do this, I am joined by a rotating cast of guest hosts to complete a cursed episode. And today I am joined by Rabia. How are you doing?
Hi, yeah, I'm doing okay. This is indeed a cursed episode at this point. Oh, man.
Of all the directors to be cursed, I wouldn't have picked this one. I mean, technical issues, sure, yes,
Yeah.
but not cursed. And not to beat around the bush, let's just jump in with the director. It's Shinya Tsukamoto.
Indeed, the infamous body horror and just overall cult favorite when it comes to Japanese genre films. So I was happy to be part of this.
He's one of the people I use as part of like a theory I have. It's the people who make the really messed up movies that are actually the biggest sweethearts.
Oh yeah, very true.
Shinya Tsukamoto is just a lovely person, but the movies he makes, debatable how they'd fall on this sort of scale.
Well, you could argue that he's very, very fascinated by human anatomy and the distortion of it, and
Yes.
that fantasy or that how do you call it, that admiration or fascination that he has with it has manifested in his films.
Absolutely. I mean, the question I'd ask now, I think it's largely the same for everybody, but as far as your relationship with his work, history with him and his output, what you like with Shinya Tsukamoto? What's your sort of entry point?
I think as a lot of other people, my first Shinya Tsukamoto film was Tetsuo, Iron Man. I don't know. It's just obviously it's a cult, favorite. It's one movie. If you name it, even people who watch more on the well-known or mainstream genre films will have heard of Tetsuo. So
Yes.
yeah, it's one of those things you just can't miss if you're a genre fan. And then from there you just go deeper and then you fall into this rabbit hole of weirdness. But definitely for me, my first was Tetsuo.
I asked this question at the top, but would you describe him as an extreme filmmaker? Because I know there's like the whole subgenre and subset of extreme horror, and you could make the case for him being part of that, but also it's a little bit muddy, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify him as part of the very extreme Japanese genre films, because that's more the guinea pigs, for instance, and
Yes.
what's it called, tumbling doll of flesh, or the cement movie, or the concrete girl.
I mean, the extent of my knowledge of that is, I can't remember the name of the director. Is the one who directed Nori, or he did? Is it Grotesque that he did?
Oh, Grotesque is one. So those are more on the indeed grotesque / extreme side of films. And then you, of course, have what I call Japanese tech trauma. So those are movies like Machine Girl, Death Ball, Zombie Ass.
That is a real film as well. It sounds like you've just made something up.
No. These are indeed actual movies. These are not random names that I am mentioning. So yeah, no. As far as extreme or extremity, I think Shinja is like at the start of those fringes, not at the outer skirts of those fringes. Definitely, it's more seasoned and spicy than a regular art house drama, even a horror movie from Japan. But especially with all the body horror and stuff, and the body horror that it's inspired in things like horror anime, for instance, and
Oh,
sci-fi
yes.
anime. However, the depth of it, because there's still some type of narrative and scientific background, and you can tell that there's still some like really an art that he's trying to portray. Not that I'm saying that the other stuff, don't, but there's more
Well,
tangibly, or like more, you can really tell that he's trying to still keep some type of narrative in there.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The two movies that we'll be talking about in today's episode, I
Mm.
guess you could describe them as quite opposite extremes of what makes Tsukamoto tick. We have the aforementioned 1989, I believe it was, Tetsuo Iron Man, and 2004's Vital.
Yes, yes, yes.
Very wildly different beasts.
Especially in style, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, just one's about as aggressively toned as you can get, and the other one's quite laid back. Part of this theme of scene or theme of movies that you get sort of a sleep paralysis horror. Not that I'd describe Vital as horror, but it has a lot in common with those sorts of movies. The Come True is one
Mm.
that I've talked about on the podcast before. I can't think of any off the top of my head now, but it has that sort of sleepy tone and sleepy nature to it.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're trying to say with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing, like, because Tetsuo is at some points really high paced. It's very chaotic. It's very high energy, so it's
Mm.
constantly like throwing things at you. Of course, with the body horror that's happening, the body modifications that are the changes that are happening. It's black and white. It has like this very aggressive score in places, and Vital literally mood wise is the opposite, not only theme wise, because it's about the exploration of a human body. Who are you as a person? What makes you as a person? It's so much more philosophical. But then on top of that, the main actress, the one that's being dissected, that's not a spoiler, by the way, um in these dream sequences or memory sequences that happen throughout the movie, you see her dance, and she is actually a professional ballet dancer. So this is her only acting credit, as far as I could
Oh
find.
wow.
And she is more known as a physical performer in dance. So she's done ballet in Japan, and she's done more eclectic and modern forms of dance as well. And it really, really shows in the movie, because the flow of her body when she's expressing herself in dance is the same rhythm that the rest of the film follows as well.
Hmm.
There's a parallel between the two.
He cast similarly outside the art form as well for Coco. Kotoko with the singer Coco. I'm
Yeah,
not sure about her further dalliances in the film, but that was her debut performance, as far as you understand it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, she's
Hmm.
done a few other movies, Coco from Kotoko. Um, uh, A Bride for Rip Van Winkle.
Shunji Awai, that was, I think.
Yeah, I think so. No, no, it's uh by Mashiro Satonaka. Sorry.
Hmm.
She was in two yeah, so two versions of that particular film or series. And
Hmm.
then she was also in Girl of the Sea.
So we'll start with the earliest of the two movies,
Mm.
1989's Tetsuo the Iron Man. As far as plots for this, it's hard to pin down, it's hard to explain, because effectively it's one day a salaryman is hit by a car and he has an interaction with a metal fetishist,
Yeah.
and the two of them become more sort of infected by metal. They become more metal men,
Mhm.
more Iron Men as the movie
Mhm.
goes along, and they have interactions with a few people as a love interest. But it's just that sort of awakening, that sort of transformation. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it's Tetsuo one has inspired so many other films, but it's in its premise. That's the easy way for of
Oh yeah,
explaining
absolutely. Yeah, it gets
it.
quite dense as far
Ye-
as subtext that you can dig into.
Oh man, so much, and the because the world that it plays out in, um, is so weird, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
people don't react the way you would think a person would react if their husband slash boyfriend slash partner is turning into part metal, part human in front of your eyes, and
Yeah. Is the love interest in particular? I
yeah,
don't. I know sharing interests with your partner is a good thing, but that's taking it quite far.
yeah.
'Cause I think getting the elephant in the room out of the way at the start, because the reason why it took me so long to get around to seeing this, because as a child I remember seeing the drill sequence where the drill's substituted in for his
The
member for his penis.
yeah, the phallic drill sequence, as you could name it.
Yeah. And when you see that, I mean, maybe I was about 13 years old, just sort of discovering movies, that's a very extreme image.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I think nowadays this would be something if this movie came out any later, or if the TikTok generation discovers it, then that would be the
Yeah.
scene, that would make it go viral, definitely. Um and again, to come back to what I was saying before, like no one responds the way that you think, like quote unquote normal people would respond in that
No.
situation, indeed, and that makes it so visceral at one point, especially if you're very young. I can imagine you as a very young person, watching it as a preteen and then going like, "What is happening here? Are
Yeah.
they insane? Like what? What is I do not understand. Somebody please
Yeah.
explain."
It's not having that context. You think, oh my God, whoever made this is a pervert.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I mean, you can have that reading. I
Yeah.
mean, by all means,
Yeah.
you can. I don't think it's fair on the movie,
No.
but
N- yeah. No, but
it,
I understand what you mean.
it's all part of sort of a subtext because just to dig at one, to pick at one, there's this thing in contemporary horror culture how a lot of movies, people sort of look for the gay subtext in them, whether it's there or not. They sort of force a gay subtext into them. But I don't think you really have to try with this one because it
No.
is kind of
No.
a huge, huge part of it and the identity of, of what Tetsuo take.
Yeah, so weirdly indeed, there is this major gay subtext, but then at the same time, there's also this almost exploration of just fetishization in general, because it's obviously obviously there's this infection happening from a man to another man, or two people who identify as men,
Yes.
um and they're having this major change going through their bodies. I mean, in a way, depending on how you want to see the subtext and the context of this, you could also perceive it as something that leans towards trans identity as well, because their bodies are changing, and they're
Yes.
becoming more or less of who they feel they are inside. Um, and at the same time, this whole this whole thing is taking over their identity in a way. And as speaking as a person with disabilities, um, in a way, you could also interpret it as the effect of disability on your life, because you're overtaken by it in a way, and it affects your relationships with other people, and it affects your relationship with your own body
Yeah.
and the control that you lose, depending on which disabilities you have. But this body dysmorphia that then can occur, and this full takeover and just becoming like completely weird in your own body and then starting to accept it. So Yeah,
Yeah,
Tetsuo has so many angles
and you
in
can
that
sort of
sense.
you can take it in other directions as well.
Yeah,
Like two
yeah,
that stood out for me is it's kind of like Videodrome in the sense of it was so prevalent at the time. It's
yeah.
still, you can put modern subtext upon it. Like the increasing
Mm,
weirdness of the internet, you could talk about Videodrome with in the same way as this. You can talk about with Tetsuo. Sorry, you can talk about how it's basically a parable for sort of the increasing industrialization of day life,
yeah, yeah,
or awakening to lust as a teenager, like, understanding your own sexuality. There's
yeah, yeah. And
just
going to changes from a teenager to an adult because that also makes your body stranger to yourself.
it does,
Yeah.
which makes it interesting. You could say it's just this perverted little black and white. I think it's shot in 16 millimeter, 16 or right, I can't remember.
Uh,
He
I
shot in film early on in his career.
It's let me just check. Yeah, this is his first movie shot on 60 millimeter. Yeah.
Hmm. Which gives it sort of a grimy, dirty, underground, dangerous feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also beautiful in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And again, that comes down to that rhythm, right? It's very hectic, but it's also like very metal and it's in your face, but not in a way that feels cheap or understated.
yeah, I mean, it's a very, I mean, in the literal sense, I imagine it's a very cheap movie. Because the
Yes.
story behind this, it must have been an absolute nightmare to actually complete. Because I think they were all living with Tsukamoto in his flat, and a lot of it is shot there or around there. And just members of cast, members of the crew were just
Yeah.
dropping out left, right, and centre. They didn't want anything to do with it. And I know Tsukamoto has a reputation of being, you look at the credits, it's like writer, cinematographer, editor, actor.
Mm,
He does everything. But in this, I think it was between him and the actor who plays the salaryman.
yeah.
They effectively did everything. So when you consider what goes on and how it's all put together, for two people to be responsible for so much of it,
Yeah.
it's a miracle that they finished it, to be honest.
Yeah, I just picked up a facts list over here, and indeed, they spent 18 months filming this movie
Oh,
at
wow.
Fujiwara's apartment, which is the lady who plays the girlfriend, and as well as the cinematographer. She is the cinematographer and the girlfriend at the same time. Shinja himself, Tsukamoto, played the metal fetishist, and then we have Tomorowo Taguchi, who played the salaryman. So
Yes.
small. I think the full cast is one, two, three, four, five, six people. And apart from one person, I think this apart from the salaryman, everyone lived on set in Fujiwara's apartment. Indeed, for 18 months,
Yeah,
which is insane. Yeah.
it is an inspirational story as well as for a movie that effectively kickstarted the boom of Japanese genre cinema in the 1990s
Yeah.
to be so humble in how it was put together.
Yeah, yeah, and it almost did not came to be. That's the
Absolutely.
hilarious fun of this, because what I understand that, like you just mentioned, everyone in one apartment, it got really crazy. People started giving up. I think at one point towards the end of the filming, people were just so sick of the whole production that I think Tsukamoto himself decided to just burn the whole thing because he was just so fed up with the whole
Oh, wow.
experience. Yeah.
Poor guy.
um, yeah, no, it's and then it just went through the festival tracks. He did make it. He finished it. He threw it into the international genre festival pipeline, and people were just so amazed by it that
No, absolutely, yeah.
yeah, it started rolling out.
I mean, at that time, I don't think there'd be sort of aggressive tone wise. This is like such
Mm.
a left field comparison, but I think the closest anybody had really seen is something like Zelowski's Possession. That's sort of that aggressive, oppressive nature to it.
Mm. Yeah, and
In
I'm also thinking maybe something like Eraserhead style wise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, between them two, you've got a pretty
Yeah,
good approximation of what Tetsuo is.
exactly. Sprinkle in some extreme metal body horror cyberpunk style, and that's what Tetsuo is indeed.
Hmm. I have to bring up the score. I mean, just check on the composer. It is Chu Ishikawa,
Hmm.
who is a regular collaborator with Tsukamoto, and I just have to say the score for this, it's
Yeah,
stunning,
yeah.
honestly. It's a stunning piece of composition. I mean, I know it gets the gag people throw at it is that it's a 67-minute Nine Inch Nails video.
Hmm. Pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but the music is just gorgeous. It's not just the sort of throbbing, that's not a word, throbbing industrial music.
No, no,
It's
no. It really,
little pieces of jazz, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And again, like you really tell with the scores, not only for this movie, but for the next one that we'll be discussing as well, is that it really helps you find that rhythm of this crazy film, despite it being so chaotic at times.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes. Another thing which is consistent throughout the grosser edge of Tsukamoto is his use of stop animation, clear animation, however you want to
Yes.
characterize it. And again, it's just absolutely amazing to consider what he's achieved here. 'Cause the
True.
use of metal sort of contorting and twisting and jutting out in all sorts of different directions. I couldn't even. I like to think that when you see a movie, you think, I've got an idea how that'd go, how that'd work. But
Yeah.
with this, no, I
I,
don't know
I
how he did it.
Well, I have a feeling that other makers might agree with me when I say this. Being poor helps you become creative.
No, absolutely, yeah,
Especially if you look at the budget, right, of this whole film, and it being, his first outing, like especially internationally. Looking at what he made and for how much he made it and what a small crew he was working with, I think it's kind of almost a situation that they were like, okay, we can't do it's the 80s, so you can't do computer graphics, there's no CGI on that level or anything like that that's affordable, but how can we portray this modification happening in a way that still feels like eerie? Because I think that's the thing also with stop motion and done in a certain way,
yeah,
especially in genre films, it can give this uncanny valley feeling at one point if it's done in a certain pace. And I
yes,
think that's done really well in how they cut it for Tetsuo, is that they really, I mean, it's a human being you're looking at, but then when those when those steps start happening, you're like, oh, this kind of feels eerie. This has like this
yeah.
weird aftertaste to it.
The chase sequences. I know there's lots of sort of metal sort of going chaotic all over the place, but there's also the chase scenes, which I think are just done beautifully. It's not like a consistent single camera motion where one character chases the other. It's
Yeah.
all cutting from like, well, it's stop animation really, but with live action actors just
Yeah. Yeah.
across these very small back. I'm assuming it's Tokyo
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah. There's this thing that someone once said about Shinya Tsukamoto, is that he must hate cities because he loves destroying Tokyo
Yeah.
in his movies or just the earth in general.
He always makes it look like the worst place in the world. I mean, what is it? Tokyo Fist? It's like the scariest
Yeah.
city in the world, what he puts up on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very, very grim. Um, is there anything else you'd like to mention about Tokyo Fist or anything that's outstanding?
About Tetsuo or Tokyo
Oh,
Fist?
sorry, Tokyo. Tetsuo, yeah, but I put
Tetsuo,
that in my
yeah,
head there,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no
Anything
worries.
about Tetsuo?
I think that people often stop after watching Tetsuo, and I think that the big fans or the genre lovers
Mm,
will have seen Body Hammer, but I would argue that Body Hammer is definitely something you need to experience as well.
okay.
Because he has more money in that one. He has more story to tell. in that one as well. And you can tell that without all the production problems, what type of movie he can portray with that vision of Tetsuo.
Mm,
However, I do feel Tetsuo, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely go see it. A lot of movies that are known as either cult classics or just classics in film and even film academics in general, um, are either influenced by Tetsuo or have influenced Tetsuo.
yeah.
I mentioned before Akira. Clearly, if you look at the animation of Akira, you see some of that bleed back into Tetsuo as well.
I hadn't
When
even
it
thought
comes
about
to
that. Yeah.
the body horror, the modifications, if you look at that, especially when towards the end of Akira, when he starts turning into this big mass, and you have that integration of metal and body. Clearly, there is some inspiration there that comes back into Tetsuo as well, with how some of those tubes run and how that body is formed and misformed and deformed and reformed. So, yeah, and I'd say look into how a movie like this also inspired other films, because obviously after Tetsuo there was a lot more happening in the scene of body horror and just body modification in genre film as well, and that
Yeah.
exploration of and what how much of your humanity do you lose, do you need to lose to no longer be a human being, basically.
Hmm. The third he's done three Tetsuo movies, hasn't he? I think the
Yeah.
third one was called Bullet Man. Have you seen that one? Because I know the reputation of it is
Uh,
pretty
b- uh,
grim.
yeah, the Bullet Man. It's not my favorite.
Very
It
diplomatic.
yeah, it's very clearly American influenced, and in this case, not a great thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I will say, I think it works. It's one of these occasions where it being in black and white just elevates it so much. Well, it just elevates it. Let's not overword it. Because when you look at it in sort of the blurring Blu-ray age, you can see sort of the joints of the makeup.
yeah,
And if it was in
yeah,
colour, I think it'd lose a little bit of its luster, and people would see it as being a very, very anime project. But when it's
yeah.
that black and white, it feels a little bit illicit, a little bit dangerous, and it just elevates the whole project, I think, above and beyond what it could have been just as just another colour movie, I think.
Oh yeah, totally agree. I think by making a movie black and white, it instantly can categorize it instantly more towards art house even, and
Yeah.
make it like festival worthy, and like just remove the color, and then boom, all of a sudden it's the best movie everyone has seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that elevation comes, and again, it comes back to that creativity that you need to have if you don't have a lot of money, right? Like,
Oh,
how do
yeah.
you still get something across and not have people be distracted by color, and have them not be distracted by how cheaply you had to make it. So elevating is definitely the word for it. You elevate it by making it black and white, and that takes a lot of distractions away from the viewer's point, because now they just focus on what's happening on the screen and not how well indeed the makeup is done, or the
Yeah.
clothes, the colors of the clothes are, and how well they're washed or not, or yeah.
I think horror fans are much more accepting of the joints in things, to be honest,
Yeah.
than
True, very true.
if you showed this to a traditional movie fan, I think they'd be appalled for first things. But yeah, they won't be quite as forgiving on it as some people are.
Yeah.
But so for the second movie of the episode, we moved to 2004 with Vital.
Yes.
This is a harder movie to sum up. How would you describe Vital, Rabia?
I can give it a go. So, a Vital is a movie about a medical student who has a almost fatal accident where he loses someone in his life. And while he's reintegrating into his old life with memory loss, he is trying to pick up his studies again. And then, um, ooh, how much do we give away? Because
Um, Not totally spoil.
okay, so he's trying to reintegrate into his studies and into his life, and he has memories and he has false memories, and that kind of creates a rift in his psyche. What part of him is the real him? Is it the man he's now become after the accident, or is he the person that he was before, but with false memories?
Yes, indeed. Excellent synopsis. I think the thing that immediately struck me for this, it stars Tadanobu Asano. I don't know what
Yes.
he's most well known for because he's done so much.
Oh man. I think if we're talking to a mostly Western audience, I mean, obviously he's been in the Thor movies, but I think
Yes.
and the recent Mortal Kombat movie as Lord Raiden. But I think most well known, if we're talking to genre fans in the West, people will know him as Kakihara from Ichi the Killer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Around that time, sort of turn of the millennium,
Mm-hmm.
2006 7, he possibly had the best run of any actor that I can remember in recent history. Because his
Mm-hmm.
judgment of roles, I mean, this is a guy who was a rock star at this point in time. He
Yeah.
could never do any wrong, really.
Yeah. I,
And of those roles, this is probably the saddest, like the most well, yeah, let's just call it the
yeah.
saddest role that he picked in that boom era.
Yeah, true, true. Because one of my favorite movies of all time is, and it's in my letterbox top five. So and you can
Okay.
quote me on that. Is 2004 Survive Style 5 Plus.
Oh, that's such a good movie. Yeah.
I know. And he's obviously one of the main actors in that film. I think that's a Jin Sekiguchi film, if I'm
Yes.
correct. And I mean, if you've not seen Survive Cell 5 Plus, can you be called, a film aficionado? um, and the same goes with, he's done such weird and such um prolific like roles, and such
Yeah.
when it comes to western roles, he then all of a sudden like has like a lot of these, not flop films, but like very overly commercial big
Yeah.
titles that he's part of, weirdly enough. And then if you look at his roster, what he does in Japan, it's like Electric Dragon 80,000 volts and Survive Style 5 Plus, and he's in the Gemini film, and he's in Vital, which is again, oh, it's just heartbreaking.
It
um,
absolutely is.
yeah, and he's in Funky Forest, and he's
I've
in
not seen that one yet.
it's I actually don't know because it's an anthology, um, but it's a lot of shorts actually. Uh, but it's, oh man, it's hard to explain. Maybe not for this episode.
I've seen the trailer. It seems a bit of a hard one to get your head around. But
Yeah.
as far as his role in this, he doesn't really say much.
No.
Um,
No.
I mean, as far as the movie in general,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very lost in thought sort of
Yeah.
movie. If you don't go in it with the right sort of mentality, it
Yeah.
may just come across as, oh, it's just a boring, quiet indie art movie. Which,
Almost, and then there's the almost necrophilia part to it.
yeah,
I mean, that's still there. It's still a Shinya Tsukamoto film. So
yeah, he has to
um
have some weirdness on the edges.
there's
Yeah,
definitely some weirdness in there. Well, like you mentioned before, right? The main one of the main actors is actually a professional dancer. There's this very slow rhythm to it. Indeed, this film is more about mood than it is about narrative. There is still a story that is being told, and for his role, especially because this is something that is happening to him. Um, it's fine that he's not expressive in words. I think his
Of
face and
course.
his acting speaks volumes in this film. I mean, throughout the film, you can tell when he's doubting himself, when he is in this fight internally of like, do I want to become the person I was prior to this accident? Or do I want to embrace the person that I am now? Do I want to let go of the past and, create a future for myself? Or is the past something that I, cherish too much and basically let it swallow me whole up to a point that it will prevent me from continuing life?
Yes, and there's I mean that's so adaptable to so many people's positions.
Hmm.
It's kind of one of these evergreen sort of things that you could look at it and take away whatever you want, really. Much like Tetsuo, not quite
Yeah.
as aggressively so, but it's definitely there. In particular, for me, the one thing that really stood out is sort of the power of dreams that it talks about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how much to say about this without going into spoilers, but um, it's almost sort of a variation of. I mean, I might have got my interpretation of this wrong, but the Mexican Day of the Dead, how people remain in your memory for as long as you remember them. Well, the people stay alive for as
Ah.
long as you remember them, I should say.
Yeah, yeah, no, I see what you're trying to get at. Yeah, so in a lot of Asian religious culture, but also just Asian cultures in general, and I'm saying Asian because this is also something that's true for South Asia, Southeast Asia, and not only Japan, is
Mm,
that the way that they think about death and indeed remaining of memory, it can sometimes be even stifling, whereas the honoring and remembering of the dead person becomes much more important than the lives that those left behind who are still living need to live.
yeah.
Um, and that's an interesting point in this story as well. Is that how much does he allow himself to move on and live an actual life, or stay stuck
Yeah.
in honoring basically those who aren't there anymore? It's and it's above all again comes back to Shinya Tsukamoto's fascination with the body and self. Um
Yes.
and that really comes back in this. I mean, literally this movie, if I understood it correctly, is inspired by the fact that he saw a medical book or
I
a
think
medical.
he was
Yeah,
at an autopsy, and he was at
yeah.
just the sort of thing that Shinya Tsukamoto does. He turns up to
To
a
not medical
medical
school.
autopsy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it
And just
sounds right
goes
for
like,
him.
oh, this is amazing, let's just anatomical sketches, I want to do a movie about it. And then it becomes this super sad and flowy and very moody story, but still on the back of it there is body and mind and identity woven into it all, because like with Tetsuo, but in a completely different way, it's coming down to who am I as a human being and what
Yes.
defines me.
Yeah, it's a theme throughout a lot of his work, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say this. I mean, people will. I don't know whether they'll believe me when I say this, but I found this harder to watch than Tetsuo.
Oh yeah, I can tell. I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
Because Tetsuo, how extreme and weird it can get at points, it still has this fast pace to it, so you don't linger in your thoughts too long. Whereas
Yeah.
because of this particular, and I do feel that it's done purposely, this slow rhythm, this mood, this drag, this dance that is slowly happening of expressions. You're left to sit with a lot of your feelings and emotions throughout this, up to a point that if you're neurodivergent like myself, you get maybe even distracted. You're like, okay, I kind of want to grab my phone and do something again.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
I
and not
understand
to
that.
disrespect the film obviously, but like it's not giving enough stimulation in contrast to Tetsuo, but still a lot is happening there, so that's
Oh yeah,
definitely not
absolutely.
on the film. It's just the mood and the pace of it is so much slower, and there's just so much more that he leaves you to just feel and think,
Hmm, true.
which again comes back to that whole philosophical question, what defines us as human being, and who are we, who is he. Um,
Yeah.
uh, that it gives you more time to breathe and think about it up to a point that it becomes harder to get through. Yeah.
As an extension of sort of the tone, I think Tsukamoto, he's largely engaged in more fantasy exploits, fantasy visions of the world.
Hmm.
I'd say, I'm not saying all of them, there's a few that I've yet to get around to, but this is one of his more realist
Yeah. Yeah.
films. And within that, one of the things that'll always just make me sort of put my hands behind my eyes behind my hands, sorry,
Mm,
is sort of just surgical details. And
mm,
see these sequences of them just picking bits off dead bodies. It's just really, really hard to watch. It's one of those things. I think other people in sort of the horror community have said it really well. I mean, you can have horror movies where people's head get exploded or
yeah.
like, blood just geezes everywhere. But that scene in Evil Dead where a pencil gets stuck in the heel or the ankle, sorry,
Oh, yeah.
it's just like
The
it makes you
Achilles heel. Yeah.
sort of vomit a little bit. And it's the same here.
Yeah.
It's just a body just completely removed of any sort of purpose or lifeblood, and they're just picking
Yeah.
bits off it. It's just the eye bit in particular, which is a lot of the marketing
Mm.
sort of pins around it. Just no, I can't handle that. I'll be honest.
Oh, I totally agree with it. I'm someone who loves watching movies that are on the fringe of extreme, or of horror, just in general, the out there, the really niche stuff.
Yeah,
Indeed, the bodies being chopped into pieces, the blood ballets and whatnot. And some movies are not even close to that blood wise or gore wise, but are made in such a way that it feels so much more visceral at trying to get through it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just so detached from. I mean, it's part of his character. He's finding his way through life again. He's finding what he understands
Mm,
through his studies.
yeah.
I mean, there's parts throughout it where his fellow students say something along the lines of, "I know he's lost his memory, but he's taking it a bit far. He's
Yeah.
getting a bit engaged with this corpse,"
Yeah. Yeah.
which he does. It's very hard to watch, but again, that is entirely the point. I think Tsukamoto is one of the rare cases of a director who sort of openly embraces things being difficult, things being
Mm,
hard to watch, which I think is where the sort of the
mm,
Cronenberg comparison comes in, because
yeah.
between this and Tetsuo, I think you've also basically got a very good comparison point to his Crimes of the Future, which from last year.
Ah, that is interesting. Yes. 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 That makes.
That's a movie about sort of body modification, surgery, and illness as almost this
Yeah.
evolution of the human form, but
Yeah. Yeah.
really weird as Cronenberg tends to do.
Indeed. Indeed.
But yeah, this could be in the same world. I think Vital and Crimes for the Future could be set within the same sort of reality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I had not looked at it from that lens yet. That is
And
interesting.
using the body for medical science as well. I can't remember the name of the actor. There's lots of familiar faces around the periphery of this. I've got the name of the extended cast there. Yeah, there it is. Jun Kunimura and Itoku Kishibe, which in isolation, the names might not mean a lot to people, but Jun Kunimura, he's got a very, very, very vast filmography. The most popular thing recently, he was in The Wailing as the Japanese villager, and
Yes, yes, and that is a. Oh my god,
a wonderful
that is a
film.
role. Have you seen that movie, The
Oh yes,
Wailing?
one of my favourites.
Oh
And
my god.
Itoku Kachiba, he was in. Funnily enough, here's a connection. He was in Survive Style 5 as the salary man who is convinced or hypnotized into thinking he's a bird.
Yeah, the dad.
And he's in a lot of Mike and Katana movies as well.
Yeah,
So he
yeah.
gets about. So he's got this sort of probably the most. I hate using this word, but this is the star-studded era of Tsukamoto,
Yeah.
because those are some big named actors in Japan.
Indeed, and they were already, like, quite in their prime at the point that this movie was made. Even
It
the
is.
actress that is the dancer that I mentioned was not just some random nameless person, but she's very famous for Japanese norms.
Yeah. And this is another movie where it has a sexual current running throughout it, because
Yeah.
one of his fellow students, she enjoys her kinks, I think it's fair to say. She enjoys being choked,
Yeah.
and not to be choked hard enough. It's
Yeah, it's what do you call it? Erotic asphyxiation.
autoerotic
Yeah, that's the
asphyxiation, I
one.
think, yeah. Which he's certainly got his quirks, as Tsukamoto, I think.
Hmm.
Which it's fine, it's cool. It's not the sort of thing that you could have this in a story of a similar sort of rediscovering self through surgery and bodily memory. I
Yeah.
don't think any other country would really allow it other than Japan, which
I think that's the interesting thing about Japan, right? Because even if you look at older films that used to be very popular on festivals, you have this whole 70s and 80s Japanese art house, but also slash gore, Pinky Eiga
hmm,
era, where movies were made about sadomasochism and prostitution and whatnot, and then people being split into pieces. Um, and it was stuff that went to cotton and whatnot. For some reason, when it comes from Japan, we seem to be very open and accepting towards it. But as restricted as culture and society is in the country, their art expressions are very go to very outer corners of the extreme, whether it comes
absolutely,
to
yeah.
film, whether it comes to literature, when it comes to music, when it comes to manga and anime. There's so many sub genres in all these expressions. And even when you look at art in general, how it's being made and consumed in Japan, is that's that one point where of that pressure cooker where they can release, it seems almost.
Yeah, a very
And it's
conservative society, and this is
yeah,
their only outlet. Yeah.
yeah. So it seems that people are just more accepting. I'm not a Japanophile or a
Oh,
complete
no.
expert in this. I am Asian and I have a Japanese family, but I do not claim a full expertise on this. But what I've noticed in general is that there seems to be like this open in acceptance basically of these expressions because of that
Yeah,
constrictedness
yeah.
in society. Yeah.
It's a weird little quirk for a very quirky movie. I mean, just touching on a bit, the dream sequences as well. Beyond
Mm.
sort of the dancing, there's I don't know what it sort of symbolizes, but there's a sequence in a abandoned sort of complex. I don't know what sort of thing it is, which with the woman from his past, the love interest from his past, just
Hmm.
with a giant rock.
Yeah.
I It's one of he's one of these directors again where he just sees so many things within it, so much meaning
Yeah.
that I know people say, what does this David Lynch movie mean? I think you could probably extend that to Tsukamoto as well. I don't think you can truly understand everything what he was shooting for
Yeah.
within any film that he does, really.
No, exactly.
A very smart man who gets sort of diminished because of the reputation of Tetsuo as sort of this
Yeah.
sleazy, dirty underground little monster that people get a bit weirded out by.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because he's made so much more and he's done so much other styles. And Vital is a very good example, a testimony to that. Um, so yeah, in general, I would always say like, okay, if you know Tetsuo, that's one thing, but yeah, check out his other stuff because
There's so
even when
much.
it comes to titles like, oh my gosh, I am drawing a blank. I want to say not Maribito, Hayes. Hold
His
on.
is one of his. Marabito,
Eh,
I think he acted in that.
Yeah, he acted in it. He wasn't. It wasn't his. Now Hayes is a really really good one. Gemini, is an
Mm.
interesting one to look at as well.
I'm a
And
big fan of Bullet Ballet.
Bullet
I know a lot of
Ballet.
people aren't, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's a great movie.
that's a good one. You mentioned at the top of this episode already, Kotoko,
Yes,
which
a
is very
very,
good.
very grim movie.
Yes, yes. And then you have a Snake of June, which is also
She's getting his S&M really out of his system with that
yeah,
one.
yeah. Weirdly enough, a lot of these are actually now on streaming, so they are quite a lot more accessible than they used to be back in the day when I was trying to find these titles.
Yeah. So to wrap up,
Mm.
a question. Do you think he has a strong filmography, Shinya Tsukamoto?
Yeah, yeah, I do, and that's because I appreciate the good with the bad. So, I mean, if you can name more than 8 or 12 great titles and some meh ones, then I think yeah, no, that's definitely
Yeah.
his filmography is definitely something that I would consider as making him um, someone who's worthy to be named on lists.
Yeah. The other sort of sub question to that is:
Mm.
do you think he's a spent farce? I know he doesn't make things as much as he used to, but do you think his what best is behind him instead of ahead of him?
Ooh, that's hard to say. I don't even know what his recent
He,
stuff is. I think Killing is his most recent thing.
he did Killing,
Yeah.
Fires of the Plane. He did a remake of that.
Ah, yeah.
He's done a few bits. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's still active.
yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Tetsuo 3 is not as strong, obviously, as his first two, so I wouldn't consider that. But, he's still trying to do interesting stuff. Kotoko is from 2011.
Yes.
Fires on a Plane is from 2014, and Killing is from 2018. So, his tone has morphed and changed over the years where he
Yeah.
started from the chaotic extreme body modification cyberpunk style to more the pinky ega, as I would call it, as well. You have things like bullet belly, and then it morphs into vital and haze, and then nightmare detective, and then it more
Yeah.
Kotoko, and then killing. So I think he has an interesting evolution of things that he's willing to try to do and is
Yeah.
doing.
The,
Yeah.
the sad fact is he's one of this generation of directors who I don't think the hunger ever leaves them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because, as far as you understand where the Japanese culture is at the moment, it's very beauty and youth obsessed.
Mm,
And with him not really tapping into either of those,
yeah.
anything that he does, it seems that it's largely internationally financed or self-financed. So the hunger's there, but the
Yeah.
industry isn't really sharing that enthusiasm.
No, and I think it comes down to that, like his style, the type of stories that he wanted to, or that he wants to maybe tell or make, were ones that made good money in the 80s and 90s. And we've reached a point now when it comes to trends and interest in Japanese cinema that you either need to do stuff really cheap and be very innovative in how you're cutting or putting a narrative together, like with and the Infinite 2 minutes. What's it called?
One Cut of the Dead is the other one, yeah.
Yeah, One Cut of the Dead is one, and the Infinite something something two
Beyond the
minutes.
Infinite 2 minutes, yeah, they're
Yeah,
very alike. Very good movies too.
yeah, and it's or it has to be something at a greater skill that level of a Takashi Miike is doing. But I also noticed that a lot of production companies nowadays, when it comes to Japanese financing, a lot of them come from South Korea, and
That
South
makes
Korea
sense.
is doing great on its own already. So,
World
um,
power, yeah.
yeah, and they're a lot stricter in what type of movies they're financing
Yeah.
that are external, so either Chinese or Japanese or etc., even Thai. Um, so yeah, it's really, it comes down to finding a niche producer, and then a niche market also that you want to service with your storytelling.
Hmm. Excellent. I think that'll be about it for part 1 of Shinya Tsukamoto. We'll be doing a part 2 with Snake of June and Kotoko, which is also a very good double bill.
Interesting.
Yes. So, Rabia, where can we find you and your stuff on the internet?
So I am part of several podcasts, one of them being Ride the Omnibus with Ariel Baska, and the website for that is omnibusride.com. You can find me also as part of the Cultured Curators, which is theculturedcurators.com. With Benjamin Frankenberg, and then me in general, if you want to follow any pop culture insights, especially international horror and genre film insights, and a lot of other stuff that I do. I'm everywhere on the internet as Rpish, R-P-I-S-H, and that's all the socials, all the other stuff. If you want to follow me on any platform, if you type in R-P-I-S-H, you'll be bound to find me and to see what I'm currently doing. If I'm at festivals, sometimes I run festivals, sometimes I visit festivals. I get to do a lot of awesome stuff. So, yeah.
I'll put the links to all of that in the description. As far as keeping up with the podcast, find me across social media as Uncut Robcast. And until next time, with more from Shinya Tsukamoto, this has been Directors Uncut.